Hello! Today we'll be showing you how to replace the motherboard in a Samsung XE303C Chromebook. First, you will need a few tools. For starters, it is recommended that you use an anti-static mat to avoid electrostatic discharge, which can damage electronic parts. You will need a small, magnetic tip Phillips head screwdriver. A pair of tweezers may come in handy for manipulating small parts. A spudger will also be useful for this replacement. You can use metal or plastic, whichever you prefer. First, you want to remove the 5 visible bottom cover screws. You will also need to remove the 4 screws from underneath the 4 rubber feet. The tweezers may be useful in removing the feet, as they are sticky with adhesive. Once all the screws are removed, you will use your spudger to carefully pry the bottom cover loose from the keyboard assembly. As you go around the perimeter of the case, it should become loose and easy to remove. Next, you want to disconnect the battery cable from the motherboard. Now, you will remove the 6 battery screws. You can now remove the battery. Next, you will disconnect the trackpad cable from the motherboard. Now, you will disconnect the keyboard cable from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect the speaker cable from the motherboard. Now, you can disconnect the LCD cable from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect the 2 Wi-Fi antenna cables from the motherboard. Now, you will disconnect the charging port cable from the motherboard. Now that all the cables have been disconnected from the motherboard, you can remove all 5 screws holding the motherboard in place. You can now remove the motherboard. You can now put your replacement motherboard into place and replace the 5 motherboard screws. Now, you can reconnect the charging port cable to the motherboard. Next, you can reconnect the 2 Wi-Fi antenna cables to the motherboard. Now, you can reconnect the LCD cable to the motherboard. Next, you will reconnect the speaker cable to the motherboard. Now, you can reconnect the keyboard cable into the motherboard. Next, you will reconnect the trackpad cable into the motherboard. Now that the motherboard is back in place and reconnected, you can put the battery back into place and replace all 6 battery screws. Once the screws are replaced, you can reconnect the battery cable. You can reattach the bottom cover by snapping it back into place. The final step will be to replace all 9 bottom cover screws and the 4 rubber feet. You have now successfully replaced the motherboard in your Samsung Chromebook. Nice job!